The legacy of the Carpenters is one of beautiful, perfect melancholy, a harmony so pristine it concealed a raw, private heartache. For decades, the public heard only the gold-plated records and the sweet, haunting contralto of Karen Carpenter. But behind the polished image lay a family secret, a deep, pervasive silence maintained fiercely by the one person who knew the truth best. Her older brother, Richard. Richard Carpenter was the musical prodigy, the meticulous arranger, and the other half of the duo. And after Karen's devastating death in 1983, he became her keeper, choosing carefully what parts of her story would be told. His decision to finally break the silence, years after the fact, was not an act of betrayal, but an emotional release, a difficult attempt to finally reconcile his own grief with the narrative that the world had accepted. What he eventually revealed rewrote the tragedy, detailing not just the slow, painful demise of his sister, but the complex, often crushing dynamics of a family unit that prioritized genius over happiness, and the profound cost of fame that demanded perfection at any price. Karen was born in 1950, a cheerful, sometimes clumsy younger sister, living firmly in the radiant shadow of Richard, who was 4 years her senior, and already deemed the family's artistic destiny. Their mother, Agnes, a formidable figure, meticulously cultivated Richard's musical gifts, his perfect pitch, his early compositions, with a devotion that bordered on obsession, seeing him as the vehicle for the family's future greatness. For Karen, the attention was sparse and often dismissive. She was the background noise the child relegated to harmlessly banging pots and pans in the kitchen, a phrase that would crystallize her lifelong struggle for recognition and validation, particularly from Agnes. When the family moved from Connecticut to Downey, California, in 1963, the relocation was fundamentally driven by Richard's career prospects in Los Angeles, cementing the narrative that Karen's existence was secondary to her brother's grander, artistic purpose. It was in the new, unfamiliar landscape of Downey High School, isolated and struggling to fit in with her East Coast accent, that Karen stumbled upon her own latent genius. A moment of boredom in music class led her to the drums, and within weeks, she didn't just play. She mastered the instrument with a rhythmic instinct that stunned her instructors, confirming she was a prodigy in her own right, capable of effortlessly handling pieces like Caravan. Wunder. Yet, even this undeniable physical talent could not shift the needle of her mother's approval. Richard received expensive equipment and private lessons, while Karen practiced on borrowed drums, a financial and emotional disparity that etched itself into her teenage diary, where she penned the doe. Immortal, heartbreaking observation. A mom thinks Richard is Mozart and I'm just noise. Despite the difficult family dynamic, Richard was the first to recognize Karen's true, world-changing potential. While he saw her drumming talent as extraordinary, it was the sound of her voice, a rich, dark contralto that emerged almost accidentally while she was singing "I'll Be Seeing You," that convinced him of their shared future. She was a drummer who happened to sing, but Richard, the supreme arranger, understood that her vocal texture was the unique element that would define their sound. By 1967, they had formed Spectrum, refining the harmonies that would become their signature, even as record executives rejected them for being too soft for the prevailing rock landscape. The breakthrough arrived in 1969 with a demo of their slowed-down, emotionally resonant take on the Beatles' Ticket to Ride, which landed on the desk of A&M Records co-founder Herb Alpert. Captivated by Karen's voice, Alpert signed the duo, launching their career just as Karen turned 19, still requiring her parents' co-signature on the contract that would soon make her a global icon. The debut album was a modest start, but the true seismic shift occurred on July 25, 1970, with the release of They Long to Be Close to You. The song rocketed to #1, instantly transforming the quiet, ambitious siblings into global superstars. This monumental success was compounded just months later by We've Only Just Begun, a song Richard heard in a bank commercial, and persuaded its writer, Paul Williams, to expand T. It became a cultural touchstone, a ubiquitous wedding anthem that cemented the Carpenters' image as the sweet, wholesome voice of a hopeful generation, earning them multiple hit singles, sold-out tours, and a Grammy for Best New Artist in 1971. As their success mounted, So did the internal and external pressures that began to expose the fragile nature of their partnership and Karen's identity. Naturally shy, Karen preferred the protective barrier of her Ludwig drum set on stage, viewing herself as a musician who contributed rhythm and harmony first and foremost. However, the audience and crucially, their management demanded a visual focus, a front woman. The complaints from critics that the stage lacked a focal point forced Karen to step out from behind the drums by 1972, limiting her beloved drumming to mere showcases while she stood, exposed, at the microphone. This shift was a painful stripping away of her self-identity, a feeling she articulated in interviews. I consider myself a drummer who sings, a sentiment that was increasingly ignored by the machine of fame. Compounding this identity crisis was the relentless scheduling imposed by Richard's perfectionism and the persistent, toxic dynamic of her family. Even as Karen's voice was the undisputed centerpiece of their global phenomenon, her mother, Agnes, continued to shower public praise almost exclusively on Richard's genius as an arranger and composer, constantly diminishing Karen's role. The work schedule was punishing. 174 concerts, a full album, and numerous television specials in 1973 alone, leaving Karen feeling exhausted, powerless, and reduced to the manufactured image of the sweet-voiced icon. A role that demanded she be sweet, slender, and compliant, a compliance that masked our compliance. The deeper, silent rebellion brewing inside her. By the mid-1970s, the physical toll of the relentless touring and internal strife was alarmingly visible. In 1975, the Carpenters abruptly cancelled their European tour, citing exhaustion, but the tragic truth was Karen's deteriorating health. At a dangerously low weight of 91 pounds, she was too weak to stand through a performance set. The public speculated, but the private reality was anorexia nervosa, an illness poorly understood and shrouded in immense shame at the time. Yet, even in this frail state, her innate talent was undeniable. In a testament to her musical authority, Playboy magazine's 1975 music poll voted Karen the 10th best drummer in the world, ranking higher than the legendary John Bonham. For Karen, the recognition was bittersweet, a painful reminder of the instrument and the artistic autonomy she had been forced to abandon. A brief window of opportunity for that autonomy opened in 1979 when Richard entered rehab for his addiction to Quaaludes. Karen seized the moment, traveling to New York to pursue a solo album with the acclaimed producer Phil Ramone, known for his sophisticated work with Paul Simon. The recording sessions were transformative. Karen experimented with disco and jazz, delivering sultry, mature tracks that demonstrated a versatility and confidence never allowed in the Carpenters' clean-cut sound. Paul Simon himself was so impressed with her rendition of Still Crazy after all these years that he altered a lyric specifically for her version. Friends who heard the finished product were certain this was her true voice, her declaration of independence, and Karen herself considered moving to New York to finally escape the suffocating family environment in Dooney. But this dream was brutally crushed in early 1980 when she played the finished album for a newly rehabilitated Richard and the A&M executives. Richard viewed the project as a personal and professional betrayal, and Herb Alpert, dismissing the album as unreleasable, shelved the entire project. Karen was not only silenced, but was financially penalized, charged a crushing $400,000 for the recording costs, which were deducted from her future Carpenters royalties, a financial and emotional blow that extinguished her hope for self-determination. Amid the profound professional disappointment, Karen desperately sought stability in her personal life. She rushed into a relationship with Thomas James Burris, a real estate developer 9 years her senior, whom she married in August 1980 at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Karen, who longed for a family, convinced herself that Burris was the love and domestic security she craved away from the stage lights. However, just days before the wedding, the fairy tale shattered. She discovered Burris had undergone a vasectomy and had no intention of reversing it, crushing her lifelong dream of having children. When she turned to her mother for emotional support, Agnes was cruelly pragmatic, insisting the wedding proceed to save the family's reputation, reportedly telling her daughter, "You made your bed. Lie in it." Karen walked down the aisle with a broken heart. initiating a marriage that swiftly deteriorated. Burris was not only secretly in debt, but he began systematically borrowing and draining massive sums from Karen's fortune, $35,000 here, $50,000 there, while emotionally abusing her, mocking her fragile body by calling her a pie of bones. Richard later admitted to seeing the signs of her escalating pain, but like others, felt powerless to intervene in a cycle of illness and manipulation that was spiraling out of control. By 1981, her condition had reached catastrophic levels. She was consuming up to 90 laxatives a day alongside thyroid medication, purchased under a false name, to frantically boost her metabolism, plunging her weight to a shocking 77 pounds. In the last 2 years of her life, Karen sought treatment in New York, trying desperately to confront her disorder, but she was trapped in a cycle of pressure to recover quickly, and a lifelong craving for approval that remained unfulfilled. Richard's most painful revelation centered on a therapy session he attended with Karen and their mother in the early 1980s. While Richard was finally able to tell Karen, face to face, that he loved her, their mother, Agnes, could not utter the words of approval. Karen had spent her entire life seeking, not even in that vulnerable moment, not even when her daughter was girly done. Richard confessed that this moment haunts him still, recognizing it as the critical, emotional validation his sister desperately needed, but never received. Though Karen appeared to be turning a corner in late 1982, even gaining weight through intravenous nutrition, a sudden change that dangerously strained her weakened system. The fragile balance was irreparably broken. On the morning of February 4th, 1983, Karen was preparing to sign her divorce papers when she collapsed at her parents' home. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She was only 32 years old. The autopsy confirmed that she died from heart failure caused by years of starvation and the toxic effects of emetine, a substance found in ipecac syrup she had been abusing. Richard's admission, years later, was a heavy form of self-condemnation. He had been there for every step of her journey, from the first rehearsal to the last conversation. Yet, he admitted he saw the warning signs, but simply did not know how to stop them. His life since has been a quiet dedication to preserving her sound, remastering their catalogue, and finally releasing her 1996 solo album, what she once called our record for the world to hear. Richard's truth is a painful echo of his grief, that behind the flawless harmonies was a sister he could not save, and the decades of silence he carried was born of a sorrow too immense for words. A burden he continues to bear as the keeper of the most heartbreaking song in music history.